This is a 3D printer. This is a statue. This is Groundeffected. And this is what I made this week.
You thought I forgot, didn't you? My name is your dad.
And welcome to a grown man playing with dollies on the internet. And by dollies, what I mean is 3D printed models that are printed in my 3D printer and then painted to make them look very nice to put on a shelf. If you're new around here, I like to make models of all kinds. I make miniatures, I make statues, and I make remote control tanks sometimes that blow fire out of them. Video of that is coming soon. If you haven't seen my little meme video, go check that out now. There will be a link up. There was a link somewhere. While you're checking that out, you might want to leave some comments, which is the words that you will leave in the square box below that YouTube gives you to leave some words in. This does help somehow. I don't know how, but when you're leaving that comment, leave a like and a subscribe, share the video with your gran, and let's get into how I painted the April. Before we get into the video, I'd like to give a huge shout out to this video's sponsor, which is CA3D Studios. These guys are a Patreon that you subscribe to monthly and you receive multiple files. The last time I checked, they give out 6 files a month, which is freaking ridiculous, and really great sculpts that are amazing to look at and print. Also to paint if you like that kind of thing too. One of the greatest things about this Patreon is they really give thought to how the model is going to be painted. This is such an important thing, at least for me, when I'm choosing something I would like to paint, and for that reason I give them a thumbs up. Now the model I'm painting in this video is part of their April releases. Of course, we are getting out of April now, and so if you would like to get this model, you would need to join up to this VIP plan, and when you've done that, make sure to send a message to them and tell them that you've come from this video so that you can get the April file if that's what you're looking for. Thank you so much to CA3D Studios for supporting the artists who create the content about the things that they make as well. And let's just get straight into painting this video. I don't know why I keep doing this. I actually think I'm finally going crazy. So it's no new news that I like to use a Chaos Black Citadel spray paint as my base layers for all my models. And that's what I used for this statue. I then took an ink and I sprayed that over the top of it. Now, I'm doing a yellow suit, and in theory, using black as the undercoat is the worst idea that you could ever have. However, I'm hoping that this will come through later and show off the way that I wanted it to. I put the girl aside and I started working on all the features upon the base. And to start off with, I painted this little piece of papery thing. And I started by painting it off with a copper in color, and this is because I feel like it is copper in color. I then gave it a shadow with some burnt exhaust type colors, which also came from a different brand, as you could tell. And I sprayed a wash at the bottom just to tie everything together, and this is where I was pretty much done with the copper on this part. I painted white into the goop that is coming out of the part. This is because I want to paint this a different color later, and also because if I painted that color later, it wouldn't be bright enough. And now because I think I have something wrong with my brain, I'm going to start working on a different part of the model. And this is going to be the bricks that are laying on the base of this statue. And I painted them with my favorite color of all time, red leather. Because who wouldn't want bricks that are made of leather color? And then just to really confuse everything again, I worked on something completely different, and this is the actual base. And I sprayed a grey over everything just to give some kind of a gradient to that concrete that's on the floor. And then I used a panel line wash liner thing from Tamiya, and I pretty much put that in all the little cracks all about on the model. This was to create some depth, and I realized that I also made a big mess with this. So I came back with the dry brush later and used a lighter grey to kind of dry brush over the top of that and hide some of that mess. I incrementally worked my way up to a lighter color, namely white. And once that was done, I believe it was too white. So I went back with the non-oil wash and sprayed that in some of the areas to create some depth. While I was about that, I just used some of that to give some shadows to my bricks too. I then took some washes and painted select few bricks. Not all bricks, just a couple of them. And this is because not all bricks are the same color. And really, I probably should paint them all different colors, but I'm a little bit lazy, and so I just used the wash to tint some of them different colors. And while that wash was drying, it was time to go back and paint the goop that is coming out of my sewer pipe. And for this, I used a technical paint from Citadel, which went a little bit globularly. That is an actual word, look it up in the dictionary. Don't do that now, look after the video. But when the paint goes globularly, it's not good. In this case though, it's supposed to be goop, so it worked out fine. There is a sewer cap thing that she is standing upon, and this sewer cap needs to look like a sewer cap. So I painted it sewer cap bronze, which is an actual color, and then I gave that a bit of a wet blend with some darker. You saw what I did. You saw what happened. Don't worry about it. You just put bronze in the area and hope for the best. Now to get back to those bricks, I needed to kind of change the color of the concrete, because that couldn't be the same color as the brick, otherwise it would look weird. And so I used a sort of dusty color, which I thought was going to ruin this, but actually worked out really well. Really well. And this I just dabbed on. I didn't actually paint this. You don't want this actually to be too thick. You don't want it to cover all the cracks. You kind of want to leave some of the old paint in the crevasses, because this makes it look a little bit more realistic. I then went and masked off some of the areas on her boots, because her boots are white, so I added a bit more white in this area before I moved on to this step. Masking this off means that I'm going to be able to paint the rest of her suit without worrying about getting yellow on everything else. I then used Imperial Fist yellow, which is a very bright yellow, and I painted that over everything. Now what you will notice is that everywhere that was actually black, the yellow that goes over the top of that turns to an awful green. So in order to tint that, I'm going to use this powerful Iyandin yellow and spray that from the bottom. This is going to tint that green to a slightly less darker green, but it's still going to be greenish. And once that dries, you will see that there is a tint over the top of that green. However, green is the color of shadow. And for this model, I wanted to have a lot of contrast just because I'm trying something and I thought it would look good. Now for the skin tones, I used the usual suspect of skin tone paints that I would usually use. My light just went out. I've made many videos on how to paint skin tones. You can just look through my videos and find a lot of videos about how to paint skin tones, and almost in every video I paint someone's skin tones, so I'm not going to go over that now. Going on to this base, I'm going to dry brush a little bit of highlights with some silver over the top of those pieces of metallic things on the base. And while that all dries, I'm going to come back to the suit again, and this time I'm going to paint the zippers and some of the buttons with a dark silver to make them look kind of like metal, I guess. Now for the infamous picture that shall not ever be seen again after this. And that I use 5-minute epoxy. I've said this in every video, and there's always a comment about what is it and how is it. It's 5-minute epoxy, my dudes. And all I do is I print this thing out on a piece of paper, I cut it roughly to the shape, I stick the epoxy all over this thing, and then I place the picture in it. And then I hold it down, try to press it nicely and make sure all the edges are done. Sometimes I have to burn off edges, sometimes I have to cut them off. There's a lot of things going on here. But if you would like to see a more in-depth video about this, you could join my Patreon. And there is a video where I specifically went over exactly how I make these things for the bottom of your base so that no one else can see them too. Once that was done, I then glued on the accessories for the base. I used super glue in this case because this model isn't going to be going anywhere. I didn't use any magnets, it's just glued together because it's going to go on my shelf and look very pretty in my studio. Now getting back to the suit, I need to paint April's belt and also her sleeve cuffs as well. They are white. Now really what you probably could do if you were going to take this super far is mask those off, paint them white with an airbrush, and then give them a shadow and all the rest of it. But you can get away with just painting these solid white. And why you can do this is because everything else is shaded. These are such small pieces that no one's gonna look at them, and if they do, I'm gonna say please stand away from my model, you're getting way too close. For her hair, I painted them with red at first, and if you remember, I had a zenithal highlight on that, so there is a lot of black in them which creates the contrast. I then used an orange over the top of that red to create a bit more highlights over the top of that. Then using a Carabao Crimson, which is a shade and it's red in color, I sprayed that from the bottom to give a bit more depth to my blend over this hair. I then dry brushed some red leather over the top just to bring it into the brown area so it's not completely red, but it has a bit more natural look to it. I then used a lighter skin tone over the top, only on the highlights, just to bring out a couple of strands here and there. And now for some reason, apparently I painted all this skin in very weird ways, and maybe I was letting it dry, I don't even know, but this is where I was working up the rest of the highlights on the skin tones. I painted this model really quickly over a Sunday, and if you want to paint something like this, you could probably do one of these in a day too. It just takes a bit of knowledge on how to use certain parts of your workshop at certain times. So if you paint certain things and allow them to dry while you're painting other things, you can actually get quite a lot done in a very short amount of time. This is actually a skill that I have learned over the last few years of painting, and basically this is why everything looks so ADHD. It's just because I'm working on things as I'm working on other things, and this way I can make sure I get things done a lot quicker. Instead of taking a whole week to paint something like this, I can paint it in one day. Granted, it is a long day, but I can paint it in one day. Here we are working on the eyes, and I painted the base coats of black, and then a classic example of what I was just talking about, I painted then the microphone. I used the same white which I was using on the microphone to paint in the eyes and shape them up. And once I was happy with the shape, I then printed off some transfers for her eyes. Now some people will call this cheating, and I would say it probably is, but it doesn't really matter. Some people would say airbrush is cheating. At the end of the day, whatever works and it looks good for you, you do what you need to do, man. It's not anybody else's hobby, and when they throw shade at you, you just tell them to look at the end of my video. There's instructions for them that they can just follow. This is where the eyes were done, and I added a highlight to those eyes as well as painted in her teeth. I then used a little bit of a reddish tint into some skin tones, and I painted over her lips to give them a lipstickish kind of look. I also used gloss over her eyes and gloss over her lips and teeth as well, so that they looked a little bit wet. And that is pretty much where I called this model done. Now, of course, I hope you got something out of this video that will help you paint and print your own model in the future. Perhaps you're making April yourself, and if you do, maybe you want to tag me in Instagram and share it in the socials with the tag. You know what I mean, just tag me so I can see what you've made. It would be great to see. We are now at the part where I need to thank my Patreon, because without Patreon I wouldn't be able to keep making these videos, and these lights wouldn't make my eyes blind. I shouldn't have looked at that one, because I am now officially seeing 1,000,000 lights. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to thank the new patrons we got in the last couple of weeks. John Doe, Christian Pinti, Catoliba, Christoph Ruby, and Massimo de Agostino. Thank you, my dudes. Because of you, I'm able to keep lunch on my table, lights blinding my eyeballs, and models being made every single day. Of course, if you would like to see more of these kind of videos, make sure to leave a like and to click the subscribe. You've already shared it with your gran, because I know you did it in the beginning. This is when I get to tell you that if you didn't like anything you saw in this video, I don't really care. Just click the dislike button and then off. Now I'm gonna go and make some more static plastic models move, just because I can.